good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you all for your presence and your participation here today. My name is Gary Keneal, and I am the UN Resident Coordinator for covering Jamaica, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, and Turks and Caicos Islands, and I will be facilitating this meeting here today. We are very honored to start these discussions with some words of welcome from Mr. Liu Zenmen, the Undersecretary General at the Department of Economic Affairs, DESA. As most of you may know, Mr. Liu has led DESA since 2017, after serving as Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs in the People's Republic of China. Before that, of course, he has had a distinguished career in the Foreign Service of his country. Unfortunately, due to a scheduling conflict, Mr. Liu had a pre-recorded message that we will present to you now. Colleagues, I'm afraid we can't hear the message.
Pardon me, you can hear?
No, we cannot hear the audio. Can you please start over?
No, we can't hear the message.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished representatives, and delegates of the government of Cape Verde, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Bahamas, Antigua, and Barbuda, and the Marshall Islands. The chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, the High Representative for LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS, UN resident coordinators, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be opening this important event. I wish to congratulate and thank the 6 small island development states submitting their nationally determined reviews this year, 2021. The Marshall Islands, Cuba, and Antigua and Barbuda are doing it for the first time, and the Bahamas, Cape Verde, and Dominican Republic are submitting theirs for the second time. As the figures show, the COVID-19 pandemic has severely exacerbated SIDS structural and exogenous vulnerabilities. The social and economic effects of the global economic shutdowns is being disproportionately felt in SIDS through their health systems, tourism revenues, remittance flows, food security, commodities, and trade, as well as the existing debt situation. For example, according to the 2021 Financing for Sustainable Development report, tourism accounts for 80% of the total export revenues in SIDS globally. Exceptional reduction in this sector due to the pandemic severely decreased external income in SIDS. In this context, structural constraints represent, for most of them, several challenges to recovery. Excellencies, your webinars demonstrate that despite these challenges, you are showing global leadership. You are committed to transforming these unique challenges into opportunities to boost your implementation of the 2030 agenda and the Summer Pathway. I acknowledge and congratulate you on your leadership. In particular, I thank and acknowledge Cape Verde for choosing human capital and youth as the main accelerator of sustainable development, Cuba for strengthening the environmental dimension of sustainable development and sharing its experience through South-South cooperation. The Dominican Republic will reinforcing its institutions as the foundations to address structural challenges such as climate change. Marshall Islands for recognizing the need to promote collective efforts of all stakeholders, including in the management of transboundary issues.
Hello?
Antigua and Barbuda are making significant progress on SDGs related people and prioritize blue economy, and Bahamas for providing entrepreneurs with resources and funds needed to open and maintain a successful business through the Small Business Development Center. Dear colleagues, this event also expresses the political will of SIDS to come together and jointly highlight their common vulnerabilities, development challenges, and opportunities. Indeed, we see this year the first time insertion of a common SIDS specific section in their respective VRs. Such initiative once again demonstrates how SIDS are leading by example. It echoes the spirit of the Summer Pathway, which calls for genuine partnerships at the national, regional, and international levels to address SIDS' multifaceted vulnerabilities. The Summer Pathway also underscores the urgency of developing inter-regional and intra-regional cooperation for spearheading innovative solutions and accelerating SIDS' transformative sustainable development at scale. Distinguished participants, I take this opportunity to acknowledge the efforts of our UN resident coordinators in supporting SIDS in the implementation of their sustainable development agenda. UNDESA is pleased to collaborate with you, the multi-country offices and the UN country teams in your work in line with the UN reform. I have set up a SIDS task team at the UNDESA to develop the department's strategy of support to SIDS. Such strategy will offer a more tailored support to SIDS needs and priorities through intergovernmental and analytical support, as well as capacity development. Excellencies, I cannot conclude without using this opportunity to welcome the new Undersecretary General and High Representative for LLDC and SIDS, my good friend, Ambassador Kadri Rache. I firmly believe that under his leadership and vision, the two SIDS units of UNDESA and OHRLS will further support SIDS throughout the decade of action and the delivery for the SDGs. I trust that this event will yield inspired conversations and fruitful action. I thank you.
Thank you so much for this excellent, I think, startup from Mr. Liu. Excellencies, distinguished guests, before we go any further, you will have noticed in the chat that we have information for translation in case that is needed, and we will continue to update this information in the chat as required. Please also feel free to contact us through the chat if you're ever having any difficulty with the communication of any sorts. I think we're ready now to begin with our first speaker from Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Chet Green, who is well known, who received a degree in sports administration from the University of Poitiers in France. He was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Immigration in March of 2018. He previously served as Minister of Trade, Commerce and Industry, Sports, Culture, Community Services since 2014. Honorable Minister, it's a pleasure for us to have you today. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished ministers, excellencies, fellow VNR countries. As a small island developing state, Antigua and Barbuda continues to face challenges that are unique to our size and exposure to shocks. These challenges are no different than other SIDS and are carefully outlined within our VNR. As a nation, we continue to find innovative ways of trying to address our particular vulnerabilities with the aim of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals through the use of the Samoa Pathway and other agreed international declarations as a means to overcoming these challenges. Noting my country's overall challenge and vulnerabilities to economic shocks and climate change, one of our main challenges is that of facing sheer scale of impacts which are interlinked and nonlinear. Barbuda was struck by Irma, a Category 5 hurricane in 2017. In that instance, the entire island was evacuated to Antigua because another hurricane yet was approaching. This had never happened before. It's instructive to note that the payout from the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility was less than $7 million United States dollars, but our recovery needs exceeded $200 million US dollars. The difference still burdens us today, even though Hurricane Irma has long stopped making the headlines. Let's fast forward to 2020, where we saw the highest number of hurricanes on record in the Caribbean. And we were hit then, same year 2020, by the global COVID-19 pandemic and its hold on tourism, which accounts for more than 70% of Antigua and Barbuda's economy. Today, 2021, the world is now at 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The challenge we face, therefore, is how do we move? How do we move faster with extreme debt burdens and the loss of development aid eligibility, and with the limited climate finance trickling in? We are taking action as a government, and our climate change resilience strategy is threefold. Firstly, we are strengthening our physical planning systems to better address climate risks. Second, we are assessing or accessing climate finance for immediate adaptation and climate damages. And in thirdly, we are advocating to mainstream climate change in all financial decisions. On the first point, Chair, our government is preparing a national adaptation plan using climate models to assess risks in 6 priority sectors, namely infrastructure and housing, wholesale and retail, food security, finance, tourism, and our protected areas. Changing physical plans is a long and delicate process, as we all know. For example, a change in the setback distance from waterways due to flooding will affect at minimum 10% of all private landowners, and this requires extensive consultation. Adaptation planning is important. This, however, will take time to deliver results, and climate change, as we all know, is a tremendous cost. On the second action area, access to climate finance through the hard work of our Development of Environment, we have secured over $50 million United States dollars through the national access from the Green Climate Fund. The climate finance goes directly to fund the government programs, which eliminates intermediaries, speeds up delivery time, and ensures strong local buy-in. Including this amount is $30 million grant to upgrade essential health and security buildings in Antigua and Barbuda to cope with hurricanes of Category 4 and stronger, and mainstreaming climate change adaptation in the building sector, as well as future investments and strengthening climate information services for early detection and action. Antigua and Barbuda is not necessarily unique in this regard. Between the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund, 15 small island developing states now have national entities that are either accredited or which have direct delivery partners. SIDS have been most proactive in building a localized climate finance capacity, which by itself is an asset for building meaningful resilience locally. Antigua and Barbuda is, however, in some ways unique, as we have the only direct access entity as a small island state with 2 separate and distinct approved GCF projects. What we're doing here is leveraging our experience through South-South knowledge to support direct access by the OECS and CARICOM. Antigua and Barbuda's chair of AOSIS is also advocating for other entities in small island states to, 1, get accredited, and 2, to have better capitalized project portfolio for direct access entities. Truly, simplified access to climate finance institutions will meaningfully empower our domestic institutions. Finally, and on the third point, we need all finance institutions, whether investing or providing development assistance on islands, to mainstream and prioritize climate risk and resilience. This is called for in the Paris Agreement, but is happening for mitigation faster than for resilience, such as the new Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, which only takes into account and looks at emissions. Even our emissions actions are in the context of building resilience in our energy sector. For example, we are installing grid interactive wind turbines adjacent to our desalination plants to ensure we have uninterrupted power supplies, knowing that droughts in our country are already very severe. We are living in a more extreme world. The costs of climate extremes must be considered by all and at all levels, whether financing new hotels or major infrastructure developments. The science is clear that climate change is already here, and it will continue to get worse. Our decisions, Mr. Chair, our decisions, colleagues in our countries, our decisions, delegates, must reflect this very fact. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for these very inspiring words and for sharing with us the experience of Antigua and Barbuda, which I found to be quite compelling and certainly will feed into the discussions we're going to have in the next few minutes. Without further delay, I would also like to introduce now our third speaker for his opening remarks. He is the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States and the permanent representative of the United Nations for Antigua and Barbuda since 2014. I'm speaking, of course, of Ambassador Walton Webson, who has been Antigua and Barbuda's representative, as I've just mentioned, for quite a while. He previously held the post of director at Perkins International and received his doctorate from Case Western Reserve University in Ohio. Ambassador Webson, the screen, as we now say, is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Deputy Prime Ministers, other Ministers of Government, Mr. Liu Jiangmin, Under Secretary General for ECOSOC and the Social Affairs, Mr. Courtney Rattray, Under Secretary General and High Representative of LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS, Excellencies, Ambassadors, colleagues. Mr. Chairman, the challenges of SIDS are many, and the multifaceted nature of the COVID-19 pandemic makes it even more difficult to address these challenges that SIDS face in this time. Our vulnerability to external shocks and man-made induced negative climate activity further compounds our ability to achieve our shared and individual national development plans. Mr. Chair, resilience building, sustainability, and the sustainable development goals that we all seek to achieve is threatened. Despite our vulnerability, Mr. Chairman, as small island developing states determined not to be left behind, and as chair of AOSIS, I will continue to advance the sustainability platform for all SIDS. It is therefore why I am so pleased that we have an overwhelming amount of SIDS present with us today, presenting their VNRs this year, and that is quite exciting and pleases us. The last few months that we have faced has been unforgiving. Our countries are facing historic threats from climate change, the worst global economic contraction in history is upon us, threat to human health, and social anxiety amongst the other things that we face, especially our youths. Yet, Mr. Chairman, still, these 6 countries before us who are presenting their VNRs have decided to present theirs and to show to the world their determination in achieving the SDGs. And by presenting their VNRs this year, these countries, they are determined to show the different progress within each country, but yet also the showcase the lessons from the SIDS and to ensure a successful SDG journey that SIDS are upon. In challenging the vulnerabilities context, we must continue this journey. To be clear, Mr. Chairman, there is a consensus within the international community that the countries most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic are the SIDS. We are facing the worse than any other group of countries in the United Nations family. There's also a consensus by many that without effective, comprehensive, and tailored intervention for SIDS, we would experience a lost decade and a decline in our developmental gains, which we have made and fought so hard for. We have made these gains over many years, and the pandemic amongst the climate change is now threatening us. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, there is a consensus by most that one of the tools to assist us, SIDS most, is the full appreciation of our vulnerability and the full support of SDG 17 partnership and the implementation and means thereof. In ensuring a successful SDG journey in challenging vulnerabilities, SIDS needs equipping. This means equipping SIDS with the relevant tools to be able to help us require the completion of this journey. Building our capacity for national planning and development is paramount. Providing us with the means to adapt to mitigate the challenges of climate change is important. And ensuring we have the necessary transfer of technology so that our small states can move forward with innovation and the data collection, resilience building that will allow us to complete that journey. And colleagues, by providing the necessary financial and technical support that we so badly need is another area that must be treated effectively to external, and that will allow us to handle effectively the external shocks that are upon us. This requires an acceptance of the old ways of treating SIDS and measuring our economic success is no longer useful. It is no longer useful to measure us as high or middle income countries. Measuring our exposure to shocks and the development needs must now entail a new multidimensional vulnerability index, a new tool of measurement. It also means that graduation and from middle income to high income, etc., that threshold should no longer be the yardstick that will absolve us and many of us from international communities, from the international community's support in building partnerships. It should no longer be the tool that denies us our ability to access international support, either from donor partners or international organizations. We have heard time and time, even this week already, that SIDS are the major, that international donor support is a significant component of SIDS development strategy. And once that is removed, the SIDS are thrown into a tailspin. Finally, Mr. Chairman, as SIDS, we are committed as SIDS to present our VNRs year after year. I, as chair of AOSIS, will continue to urge all SIDS to make that presentation and to be counted amongst the numbers. We are not only sharing our struggle and sharing the progress we make, but we are also informing the community of the special efforts that we need and the support to help us in our special circumstances. I thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador. Thank you for your commitment and the understanding, of course, you bring to the table with regards to the plight of SIDS in general. I think you've made some very good points. You've given us food for thought. I'm also very grateful for you introducing the need for a new multidimensional indicator that goes beyond GDP or GNP to actually decide on how best to support progress towards the SDGs. I think this is a very important point. And now it's time for us, of course, to introduce our moderator, and I will hand over the screen to her for the rest of the discussions that we're going to have here today. I'm very, very happy to be able to introduce to this audience Dr. Miriam Jamila Sina Vieira, who is the Secretary of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Cabo Verde. Secretary Vieira has a degree in international relationships, in international relations, I'm sorry, and previously served as an advisor to the Cabo Verde mission in New York. We're really honored and privileged to have her join us today and act as moderator for the coming session. Secretary, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gary Cornell. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to moderate this panel of our discussions, having with us high-level representatives of 6 SIDS who presented their voluntary national review during this ongoing session of the HLPF, namely Barbuda that we just heard, the Bahamas, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Marshall Islands, and Cabo Verde. This is the first ever joint session of SIDS, which submitted their VNRs, and then it is an occasion for them to share common challenges, opportunities, the best practices, while highlighting progress made despite of vulnerabilities they still facing that might hamper their path to sustainable development, and also to identify measures in order to overcome those vulnerabilities and challenges that were aggravated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Without further ado, I would like to remind that each speaker has 5 minutes to make his or her presentation, and I kindly ask them to keep within the time limits. Right after the presentation, we have a Q&A session for an interactive dialogue with the speakers. Having said that, I am pleased to invite His Excellency, Mr. Olavo Correa, the Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Entrepreneurship and Digital Economy of Cabo Verde, who will elaborate on SIDS vulnerabilities in the context of the post-COVID recovery. Dr. Olavo Avelino Garcia Correa, once postgraduate in business management for Riedenburg, Bavaria, Germany, and a Bachelor of Economics from Berlin. He was appointed Vice Prime Minister of Finance in May 2016 and Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Minister of Digital Economy since May 2021. Sua Excelência tem a palavra.
Senhores representantes dos SIDS, senhores amigos dos SIDS, senhores defensores dos SIDS, todos presentes nesta importante conferência. Com o surgimento da pandemia da Covid-19, mais do que nunca ficou claro que o modelo seguido até hoje, baseado no rendimento médio per capita, para classificar os países no que tange ao acesso aos financiamentos, não é o modelo mais correto. Cabo Verde é o exemplo claro desta perspectiva. Se não vejamos, a nível das alterações climáticas, Cabo Verde é um dos países que menos contribui para a emissão do carbono, mas, por sua vez, é um dos países mais afetados pelas alterações climáticas. Estou a falar de um caso prático. De 2016 a 2019, Cabo Verde vivenciou um dos períodos de maior sucesso macroeconômico, com impactos a nível das finanças públicas, assim como no crescimento econômico, com a implementação de um conjunto de reformas que transformou a economia cabo-verdiana. Nesse mesmo período, quando todos os setores estavam a desenvolver ritmos acelerados, vivenciamos praticamente quase 4 anos de seca em todo o território. Por nossa conta, com o nosso esforço, com o suporte importante dos nossos parceiros, conseguimos ainda assim mitigar os efeitos desta seca. No último ano, sem chover o suficiente para garantir a produção agrícola do ano, tivemos uma inundação que causou estragos a vários níveis. Podemos também demonstrar a nossa vulnerabilidade perante a dependência do setor externo. Cabo Verde estava num percurso de dinâmica económica exemplar até finais de 2019, crescendo muito acima da média regional africana, com impactos económicos e sociais visíveis em todo o território nacional. Sem se prever, e ninguém previu, com o surgimento da pandemia, passamos ao país de restrições a nível menos 14% em 2020, justificando, neste caso, que os SIDS foram os países mais impactados pela pandemia da Covid-19. Fica claro, sim, porque a adoção de um índice de vulnerabilidade multidimensional se afigura de maior justeza para os pequenos países insulares menos desenvolvidos. Para além de justo, é urgente, sobretudo agora no contexto da pandemia e no contexto pós-pandemia. Cabo Verde teve um percurso de sucesso para os ODMs, que continuou nos primeiros anos dos ODS, acelerando a partir de 2016, depois de uma longa recuperação pós-crise de 2018, a chamada crise do subprime, antes de sofrer uma paragem dramática com a crise da Covid-19. Essa história de sucesso foi baseada em instituições fortes, numa boa governança e também no investimento constante no capital humano do país. num contexto de redução cada vez mais dos recursos externos e dos recursos constitucionais externos. Esses esforços e esses ganhos foram conseguidos num contexto desafiador, devido às vulnerabilidades exógenas, tendo em conta os constrangimentos estruturais que Cabo Verde, como SIDS, está confrontado. Essas vulnerabilidades são de índice social, pelo alto custo per capita dos serviços básicos e sociais, incluindo o transporte e energia, e o espaço fiscal limitado para o investimento público em áreas estratégicas. Mas também a vulnerabilidade ambiental, pela fragilidade dos seus ecossistemas e pelos eventos climáticos extremos exacerbados pelas mudanças climáticas, com as frequentes secas e cheias. Também econômico, devido à pequenez do mercado doméstico cabo-verdiano, à dependência do comércio externo, do turismo, das remessas e a falta de acesso ao financiamento, particularmente ao financiamento constitucional. Quanto à vulnerabilidade econômica, esta última dimensão é de particular relevância para Cabo Verde. Está entre os primeiros países do mundo em termos de vulnerabilidade econômica. Ou seja, a exposição a choques econômicos globais, devido à abertura da sua própria economia. Esta vulnerabilidade econômica é dinâmica e não estática e leva a uma alta volatilidade do crescimento, do desemprego, da pobreza e da segurança alimentar, entre outros. A importância do turismo, cerca de 25% do PIB, 75% da entrada em termos de investimento direto estrangeiro, 39% ao nível da criação de empregos, assim como a dependência do comércio externo em termos de importações, mas também a dependência em relação às exportações estratégicas no que tange a um único setor, nomeadamente as pescas, estão entre os principais canais de transmissão para as crises internacionais. O período de 8 anos de baixo crescimento e a criação de empregos que se seguiu à crise de 2008 traça um quadro seguramente de lenta recuperação para Cabo Verde depois de uma crise internacional como aquela que estamos a ver hoje. Outro constrangimento estrutural importante para Cabo Verde, enquanto país arquipelágico e pequeno, são os desafios adicionais de isolamento interno, mas também da conectividade. As 9 ilhas habitadas devem ser conectadas e demandam investimentos para que o seu isolamento não signifique exclusão em termos de acesso a serviços e oportunidades, como vimos tendo um alto custo per capita num contexto regional. Nesta mesma linha, convém salientar que o país enfrenta o elevado custo da multiplicação das infraestruturas, nomeadamente 7 das 9 ilhas habitadas possuem aeroportos, incluindo 4 aeroportos internacionais, e todas as 9 ilhas possuem portos, assim como a multiplicação de instituições de ensino e de saúde, elevando os custos e tornando-as ineficientes do ponto de vista económico-financeiro, mas inevitáveis do ponto de vista social e do acesso aos bens básicos. No que tange à dívida e finanças públicas, a capacidade do Estado de responder aos choques é limitada pela falta de espaço fiscal para intervenções de política, principalmente ligada a uma pequena base tributária e ao fragmentado setor privado nacional. Essas limitações dificultam o papel do Estado como estabilizador da economia e provedor das redes de segurança para ajudar a economia e os agregados familiares a absorver os choques. Como tal, é um fator crítico e uma causa da vulnerabilidade que apenas pode ser levantada com acesso ao financiamento constitucional, mas também com o perdão da dívida externa. O esforço de elaboração do índice de vulnerabilidade multidimensional, Cabo Verde está a apoiar ativamente e firmemente, como membro do secretariado em representação dos SIDS do Atlântico, Oceano Índico e Mar da China do Sul, que é um passo importante para esse acesso, mas é um passo que tem de ser urgente e tem de ser concluído com brevidade. Para terminar, um apelo final. Os SIDS são polos de inovação e as provas mostram que, ao transformar vulnerabilidades únicas em oportunidades, as parcerias estratégicas podem apoiar os SIDS a liderar soluções inovadoras e acelerar o desenvolvimento sustentável transformador desse Estado. Neste momento crucial do percurso dos SIDS, as autoridades cabo-verdianas consideram essencial o reconhecimento dos SIDS como um grupo especial, um grupo único e merecedor de um apoio particular da comunidade internacional. Precisamos do compromisso do tipo Plano Marshall para com os SIDS, e assim é vital a adoção do índice multidimensional de vulnerabilidade, pelo que reiteramos o nosso engajamento enquanto nação, enquanto país, no âmbito da Aliança dos SIDS. As autoridades cabo-verdianas reforçam o compromisso com o aprofundamento da nossa participação ativa nos processos de integração e advocacia a nível de todos os PID e no grupo particular os PID do Atlântico, do Oceano Índico e Mar da China do Sul. Reafirmamos o nosso compromisso e engajamento no âmbito do Secretariado Global do Índice da Vulnerabilidade Multidimensional, em curso de elaboração, para complementar as medidas de desenvolvimento sustentável. Estaremos atentos, estaremos ativos e estaremos também a participar em todas as iniciativas estratégicas. Para terminar mesmo, o nosso plano de desenvolvimento sustentável está alinhado com o Samoa Pathway e vamos continuar a alinhar progressivamente a nossa agenda com a agenda dos SIDS. E, para concluir, quero agradecer a oportunidade e dizer que os SIDS merecem um particular apoio da parte da comunidade internacional e, para esse efeito, a aprovação do índice de vulnerabilidade multidimensional figura-se-nos como um passo crítico, um passo urgente em prol do diálogo a favor dos SIDS a nível da comunidade internacional. Muito obrigado pela oportunidade.
Obrigada, Sr. Vice-Primeiro-Ministro. And now I will leave the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Deborah Rivas Saavedra, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Trade and Foreign Investments of Cuba, who will present the path to recovery and achievement of SDGs, the experience of Cuba. Mrs. Deborah Rivas Saavedra was a postgraduate international economic relations from the University of La Habana, Cuba. Since 2020, she was held the position of Vice Minister of the Minister of Foreign Trade and Foreign Investment of Cuba. Previously, she was first as Deputy Director and then as General Director in General Directorate of Foreign Investment of MINSEX between 2012 and 2020. Usted tiene la palabra, ministra.
Muchas gracias, un placer y disculpen que le hayamos pedido la palabra con cierta rapidez para poder intervenir a nombre de Cuba. Señor presidente, excelencias, señores y señoras, es un placer para nosotros participar en este evento junto con el resto de los pequeños estados insulares, algunos de los cuales queríamos felicitar porque en el día de hoy han presentado como Cuba por primera vez su informe nacional voluntario en este foro de alto nivel de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo Sostenible. Como les decía, Cuba hace unos minutos también presentó su informe reafirmando una vez más que la implementación de la Agenda 2030 es para nuestro país un compromiso de Estado y una prioridad nacional, poniendo de relieve los avances y logros en línea con nuestro Plan Nacional de Desarrollo Económico y Social 2030, que está articulado con nuestra agenda y los objetivos de desarrollo sostenibles y metas que nos hemos propuesto. También reconocemos y evidenciamos los principales desafíos y obstáculos que enfrentamos en el camino hacia una década de acción y transformación por el desarrollo sostenible. En nuestra condición de pequeño estado insular en desarrollo, estamos muy agradecidos por la celebración de este evento y por la invitación a compartir consideraciones, experiencias y lecciones aprendidas sobre el camino hacia los ODS y referirnos en particular a la situación actual provocada por la pandemia de la COVID-19 y su recuperación. Si bien la llegada de esta enfermedad generó una crisis a nivel internacional, en los pequeños estados insulares su impacto se acrecentó debido a las vulnerabilidades, algunas ya mencionadas en esta tarde por varios de nuestros colegas, ante choques exógenos de nuestras economías y la alta dependencia de un sector externo sacudido por la pandemia, la alta vulnerabilidad ante el cambio climático, también ya mencionada por aquí varios señores que me precedieron en la palabra, la disminución de los recursos para el desarrollo, los altos niveles de endeudamiento que tenemos en nuestras economías, el debilitamiento de las instituciones y el impacto brutal a los sistemas de protección social, especialmente en el sector de la salud por la pandemia COVID-19. Desde el pasado año, también se han puesto en evidencia las brechas estructurales y sistémicas que separan a los pequeños estados insulares del resto de países, sobre todo ante un contexto de distanciamiento social que reclama el uso de nuevas tecnologías y un salto de la barrera digital. En el caso de Cuba, esta situación se complejiza ante la imposición continuada y recrudecida del bloqueo económico, comercial y financiero impuesto por el gobierno de los Estados Unidos contra nuestro país, la extraterritorial ley Helms-Burton y la política hostil de la anterior administración norteamericana, que lamentablemente permanece inamovible hasta este momento. En un momento crítico de la pandemia para Cuba, ocasionado en parte por la introducción en el país de variantes más agresivas del SARS-CoV-2, las acciones hostiles del gobierno norteamericano han dificultado el suministro a nuestro pueblo de insumos médicos y alimentos necesarios, han entorpecido el flujo de remesas de familiares a nuestros connacionales, han entorpecido el comercio de combustibles y se ha acentuado la persecución financiera de todas nuestras exportaciones y operaciones externas. No obstante, Cuba ratifica que no renunciará en su empeño de asegurar el desarrollo sostenible de nuestro pueblo y del resto de las naciones que requieran nuestro apoyo. Hemos aprendido dos lecciones importantes para impulsar la recuperación y el camino hacia el cumplimiento de los 2 DS, especialmente para los pequeños estados insulares. Primero, la importancia de invertir en ciencia, innovación y educación como medios de implementación de la Agenda 2030 y pilares fundamentales para superar los desafíos del desarrollo y la base de la desigualdad persistente que impera a nivel mundial. Es así como Cuba ha logrado que el 85% de los productos empleados en el protocolo de tratamiento de la COVID-19 en el país sean de fabricación nacional y contar, a pesar de ser un país en desarrollo, con 4 candidatos vacunales contra la COVID-19 y una vacuna Abdala, cuyo uso de emergencia ya ha sido aprobado y por tanto se ha convertido así en la primera vacuna contra la COVID-19 desarrollada en América Latina y el Caribe, lo que por supuesto nos llena de gran orgullo. Reconocemos las iniciativas impulsadas por el Sistema de las Naciones Unidas para facilitar el acceso al financiamiento para los pequeños estados insulares en desarrollo y exhortamos a la comunidad internacional a cumplir los compromisos pactados en materia de ayuda oficial al desarrollo. En segundo lugar, Cuba considera que no es posible avanzar hacia la recuperación y asegurar el camino hacia los ODS con esfuerzos aislados. Reiteramos la importancia de la cooperación internacional para el desarrollo, la solidaridad y el multilateralismo, bajo reglas de respeto mutuo y libre autodeterminación. Como complemento de la cooperación norte-sur, nuestros países deben apostar por las alianzas para el desarrollo y la cooperación sur-sur y triangular, en línea con la Agenda 2030 y la trayectoria de Samoa. Debemos complementarnos, compartir lo que tenemos, apoyarnos mutuamente y aprender de experiencias exitosas para enfrentar este inmenso reto. Cuba, aunque enfrenta sus propios desafíos, continuará apostando por la cooperación solidaria con los pequeños estados insulares en desarrollo y con el resto del mundo, para que nadie quede atrás. Muchas gracias.
Gracias por su intervención. Now I would like to give the floor to the permanent representative of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, His Excellency Mr. Chad Donovan Namor, who will be sharing the Bahamian experience in building resilience in the face of climate change and global pandemic. Excellency, the floor is yours. Do we have with us the ambassador of the Bahamas? Oh, here we go. You have the floor, sir.
Bahamas may be on mute.
Excellencies, I keep getting bumped out of the.
Mr. Namor, I guess we still have some technical glitches. We cannot hear you. In that case, I will give the floor to the next speaker so we can have time to complete the debate during this panel.
I trust that you can hear and see me.
Oh, now I can hear you. You have the floor.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you either. I think you're on mute.
So I was saying, now I will give the floor to the next speaker, who is His Excellency Mr. Pavel Isa Contreras, Deputy Minister of Planning of Dominican Republic, who will speak on the vulnerability to natural disaster in Dominican Republic, public policies for the management and mitigation of their impacts. Can you please mute yourself?
Por favor, ponga el micrófono en silencio, por favor.
I guess that's one of our MPs has the mic on. I would like to request to mute.
Me gustaría pedir que
Thank you.
desactive el micrófono, por favor.
Mr. Pavel and Contreras, I guess your mic that is on. If I'm not mistaken.
Lo sentimos, no escuchamos bien. A ver.
Buenas tardes. Can you hear me now?
Señor viceministro, yo creo que su micrófono está abierto.
Yes, it's open.
Okay, so I would like to introduce you. I was saying that Mr. Pavel Ernesto Isa Contreras has a master's degree
Tiene un máster
in economic policy and PhD in economics from the University of Massachusetts. He was sworn as Deputy Minister of Planning, Ministry of Economy, Planning and Development in August 2020. Prior to that, he served as an economic advisor to the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economic, and was officer in charge of United Nations World Food Program and United Nations Development Program. Usted tiene la palabra, señor viceministro. Can you please unmute yourself?
Unmute.
We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. Can you please put your mic on?
Viceministro, está muteado.
¿Me escuchan ahora? Can you hear me now?
Ahora está bien. Gracias.
Okay.
Usted tiene la palabra.
Sí. Decía que mis disculpas. Su Excelencia, distinguidos invitados, decía que para mí era un honor hablar en nombre del gobierno de la República Dominicana respecto a los pasos que está dando este gobierno para enfrentar el desafío de la gestión y mitigación de impactos de desastres naturales. En primer lugar, quiero introducir algunas ideas muy breves. Lo primero es que la República Dominicana se define como un pequeño estado insular en desarrollo. Lo estableció el programa de gobierno con que el partido y el presidente Abinader ganaron las elecciones y ahora ya está claramente establecido en el Plan Nacional Plurianual del Sector Público como una de las políticas priorizadas. El enfrentar el desafío del cambio climático asumiendo el país como un pequeño estado insular. Además, el país reconoce que es muy vulnerable y tiene elevados riesgos. Está en la ruta de los huracanes, tiene riesgos importantes de inundación y riesgo de sequía y enfrenta riesgos sísmicos relevantes. Los datos de pérdidas económicas como resultado de los eventos extremos no nos dejan mentir. 2 millones de personas anualmente son impactadas por fenómenos hidrometeorológicos, aunque esta cifra es muy variable año con año. En promedio, el daño económico anual por eventos hidrometeorológicos entre 1961 y 2014 se calcula en 0.7% del PIB. Una cifra muy significativa. Y la agricultura, la manufactura, el transporte y la vivienda absorben el 70% de los daños y pérdidas relacionados con eventos de este tipo. ¿Qué está haciendo el gobierno dominicano frente a esto? Está haciendo fundamentalmente 4 cosas y en eso voy a concentrar mi plática con ustedes el día de hoy. Primero, está reformando el marco legal y la gobernanza de la gestión de riesgos de desastre en línea con y articulada a la agenda global. Segundo, está incorporando la gestión de riesgos de desastres en la planificación. Tercero, está revisando el Plan Nacional de Adaptación al Cambio Climático. Y cuarto, está dando pasos para ir más allá de los compromisos del Acuerdo de París, incrementando la ambición nacional en la reducción de la emisión de gases de efecto invernadero. Se está tratando de introducir en el ADN de la política pública y de la planificación la gestión del riesgo de desastres y el cambio climático. En materia de reforma del marco legal y de la gobernanza de la gestión de riesgos, el país considera que tiene un sistema deficiente, centrado en emergencias, con limitada generación y dotación de información y conocimiento, financiamiento restringido, centralizado, desconectado del sistema de planificación, con una ley desactualizada y con una insuficiente articulación con actores civiles y locales. La respuesta es proponer un nuevo marco legal y de gobernanza que cree una coordinación nacional de alta capacidad, que articule la coordinación con las entidades públicas y con actores sociales y locales relevantes, que cree un subsistema de planificación de la gestión de riesgos de desastres y un subsistema de preparación de respuestas, un marco legal que desarrolle mecanismos de financiamiento que incrementen la inversión en reducción de riesgos de desastres, que se incremente la producción de información y se mejore la gestión de conocimiento y se fortalezca las capacidades de gestión de riesgo en el nivel local, que es un desafío central, fortalecer las capacidades locales. En el segundo tema sobre incorporación de la gestión de riesgo en la planificación, estamos planteando 4 cosas. Primero, revisar la Estrategia Nacional de Desarrollo con perspectiva de gestión de riesgo y cambio climático. La Estrategia Nacional de Desarrollo es el marco nacional de 20 años que establece la visión general de largo plazo del desarrollo y sus objetivos. Y tiene 4 ejes. El eje institucional, reformas institucionales, el eje social, el país al que aspiramos en términos sociales, el eje económico, el país económico al que aspiramos, y el eje 4, que es los temas ambientales. Y estamos obligados por ley a revisar al 10º año de la estrategia, revisarla, ¿no? Y hacer una nueva ley de Estrategia Nacional de Desarrollo. El país está inmerso en un proceso de fortalecer el componente de cambio climático en el eje 4, que tiene que ver con las cuestiones ambientales, y está transversalizando la gestión de riesgos y el cambio climático en los 4 ejes de la Estrategia Nacional de Desarrollo. Ese es un primer elemento. El segundo elemento es que está incorporando la perspectiva de pequeño estado insular y de cambio climático en el Plan Nacional Plurianual del Sector Público, que es el plan de 4 años del gobierno. Y eso ha implicado directamente formular una política. Una de las políticas del plan es la sostenibilidad ambiental y el cambio climático en un país insular. Y eso compromete la producción y el trabajo del sector público con objetivos y resultados verificables, y también el Sistema Nacional de Monitoreo y Evaluación. El tercer elemento en la cuestión de incorporar la gestión de riesgo a la planificación está la incorporación de la gestión de riesgo del cambio climático en los procesos de elaboración de los planes municipales de desarrollo y de los planes estratégicos institucionales en el sector público. Y desde el Ministerio de Economía estamos elaborando guías y capacitación para introducir este tema del cambio climático y la gestión de riesgo en las entidades públicas del gobierno central y en los gobiernos locales. Y también estamos reformulando las guías para la preparación de proyectos de inversión pública para que tengan perspectiva de gestión de riesgo de desastre. Y estamos finalmente desarrollando nuevos indicadores sobre riesgo y efecto del cambio climático, siguiendo la SENDAI, el marco para el desarrollo de estadísticas ambientales y los ODS. El cuarto elemento es que estamos revisando el Plan Nacional de Adaptación al Cambio Climático. Y eso implica dos cosas. Primero, la actualización de ese Plan Nacional de Adaptación y la conversión del plan en una estrategia nacional. Y eso significa que tiene mucho mayor rango. Por lo tanto, refleja la importancia que le está dando el gobierno al tema de cambio climático y gestión de riesgo. Y el segundo elemento es la territorialización y la municipalización del plan, es decir, llevar el Plan Nacional de Adaptación al Cambio Climático a los territorios, que tenga una referencia y una expresión territorial a través de los planes municipales. Y por último, y con esto concluyo, estamos actualizando la contribución nacionalmente determinada en el marco del Acuerdo de París y del Plan de Acción para la Reducción de Emisiones de Gases de Efecto Invernadero. En el caso de la ampliación de la visión de la contribución nacional, el país ya se ha comprometido a incrementar la meta de reducción de emisiones totalmente condicionada desde el 25 hasta el 27%. Y estamos respecto a la línea base, y estamos también proponiéndonos una reducción del 7% de la emisión de gases de efecto invernadero apoyada con recursos propios. Y el segundo elemento es que también estamos territorializando, es decir, llevando al territorio con compromisos específicos de cada territorio de la contribución nacionalmente determinada. Es decir, que no solo deberá haber un compromiso a nivel nacional, sino también a nivel local. Muchas gracias, Su Excelencia, por la atención y me disculpo por los problemas técnicos que hemos tenido.
Muchas gracias, señor viceministro. And now I recognize that Ambassador of the Bahamas has just joined us. Ambassador, are you with us? Ambassador Namor, are you with us? You still with us? I see that we still have problem with connection with Ambassador Namor. So in that case, in the interest of time, I will recognize the next speaker, who is Honorable Kasten Nemra, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Marshall Islands. Mr. Nemra holds a Bachelor of Business Administration from the University of Portland in the state of Oregon, United States of America. He has been the Foreign Minister of the Marshall Islands since January 2020. He previously served as the Chief Secretary, which heads the public service from 2008 to 2015. The Minister of Marshall Islands will address to the audience with a pre-recorded statement. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
The video is on mute.
I have the pleasure to bring you warm greetings and welcome from the Republic of the Marshall Islands. I'm also honored to join colleagues from Antigua and Barbuda, Cabo Verde, Cuba, Dominican Republic, and the Bahamas in this event to share the SDG journey of small island developing states. The VNR process is an important opportunity to address the international context of our national development aspiration. As SIDS, we have much in common, including a cross-regional context. Our small-scale remote geography, narrow economic sectors, and inherent reliance on oceans result in unique challenges which are shared by all SIDS, one way or the other. As a low-lying atoll nation, Marshall Islands have no mountains, rivers, no high ground to turn to in the face of sea level rise and other climate-driven impacts. And we have long known this, that we are not alone, as all SIDS have critical infrastructure and population center within the coastal areas as well. Climate impacts for us pose a very complex planning challenge. We have often struggled to address basic social development goals. It isn't easy to maintain focus on specific individual goals or targets, while at the same time addressing a growing threats which are occurring every day. This is the reason why in the early 1990s and continuing through today, SIDS across the world's region have worked together through OASIS to sharpen the global effort to address the issue of climate change. We know how little time we have left, unfortunately, and how much is at stake today if we fail to uphold the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. If the familiar mantra is true that no one is left behind, then as SIDS member, we cannot rest until the global action and resourcing on climate dramatically improves. As island nation, we are also challenged in tackling the SDG itself, as there are a vast number of indicators in every sector. Our system are hard-pressed to keep up with the data capacity demands, not only at the national coordination level, but also within the line ministry and related sector. Our National Census Initiative is a key example of where we seek opportunity to address data gaps by expanding our data collection effort and capacity. To conclude, I have shared only a few examples of cross-cutting issues where, as SIDS, we have an inherent struggle to keep up with large international tasks like this SDGs. We certainly have the political will as island peoples to rise up and meet these challenges, of course, in close collaboration with relevant stakeholders, which include development partners, the United Nations, and other multilateral agencies. Thank you, and komodada.
I thank the minister for his statement. And now I would like to check if the ambassador of the Bahamas is still with us. Ambassador Namor? If not, we will pass to the next session, which is the Q&A session. And we have heard the panelists and then the insights shared. And I have a couple of questions to put to the speakers. And I have to also to inform that unfortunately we will not be able to interact with the minister from Cuba and the minister of Antigua and Barbuda due to the emergency reasons, so they have to left. My first question will be addressed to the Vice Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, and then I will switch to Portuguese. Senhor Vice-Primeiro-Ministro, durante a sua apresentação, enfatizou as vulnerabilidades dos SIDS no contexto da recuperação pós-Covid-19. Como se pode considerar essas vulnerabilidades quando falamos do acesso ao financiamento para a recuperação econômica e para o cumprimento dos ODS no horizonte 2030, de forma a não deixar ninguém para trás. Senhor Vice-Primeiro-Ministro, não conseguimos ouvi-lo. Tem um microfone. Okay. Agora sim. O microfone. Continua fechado.
Fechado.
Agora sim. Tem a palavra, Senhor Vice-Primeiro-Ministro. Está melhor.
Muito obrigado, desculpe, muito obrigado. Estava a dizer que nós temos que reconhecer que os pequenos países insulares, neste contexto da Covid-19, estão mergulhados numa profunda crise económica, financeira e orçamental. São países que têm uma base tributária muito limitada, estão condicionados aos processos que têm a ver com as alterações climáticas. Muitos deles têm um elevado nível de endividamento e estão confrontados com demandas crescentes de financiamento ao nível da saúde, ao nível da segurança sanitária, ao nível da educação e ao nível da proteção social. Tentar continuar a alocar financiamentos apenas com base no critério de rendimento per capita acaba por esconder um conjunto de fragilidades que põe em causa a própria sustentabilidade do desenvolvimento. Inclusive os progressos já conseguidos até agora. Este é um caso dramático, por exemplo, que nós vivemos em Cabo Verde, que é sermos penalizados pelos nossos próprios sucessos. Sucessos construídos em parceria e com o suporte dos nossos parceiros. Por isso que era muito importante olharmos para além do critério PIB per capita para as vulnerabilidades que assolam os nossos países na vertente económica, na vertente social e na vertente ambiental. E essas vulnerabilidades acabam por trazer à tona aquilo que são os desafios emergenciais com os quais estamos confrontados e que sem os financiamentos constitucionais dificilmente poderemos vencê-los. Por isso que era muito importante este apelo à comunidade internacional para que olhemos em relação ao futuro para o índice de vulnerabilidade multissetorial, permitindo que os nossos países possam ter acesso a financiamentos constitucionais mais facilitados, a financiamentos com condições melhores em termos de pagamento de reembolso, mas também com um volume cada vez maior, para que possamos continuar a sustentar o desenvolvimento, evitando que ninguém fique para trás e que ponhamos em causa os progressos alcançados até agora, combatendo as consequências da pandemia da Covid-19, mas continuando na rota do crescimento sustentável em relação ao futuro. E para concluir, dizer que por isso é muito importante que consigamos rapidamente fechar esse tema do índice de vulnerabilidade, para que esse indicador possa ser considerado também em relação ao acesso ao financiamento por parte dos pequenos países insulares, para considerar as nossas vulnerabilidades. É fundamental que isto aconteça e, por isso, nós vamos ter de investir nisto para que possamos construir fatores de resiliência, permitindo que possamos face aos choques em relação aos quais nós não temos controlo. Choques ambientais, choques sociais e choques económicos que derivam da evolução da economia internacional. Nós gerimos as consequências, mas não fazemos parte das causas. Por isso é fundamental que tenhamos os meios e esse apelo a todos os nossos parceiros para que consigamos introduzir no debate o tema do índice de vulnerabilidade multissetorial, que será muito importante e estratégico para os nossos países e para continuarmos na senda do desenvolvimento sustentável.
Obrigada, Sr. Vice-Primeiro-Ministro. And now I would like to make a question to the Deputy Minister of Planning of Dominican Republic, Mr. Pavel Contreras. Deputy Minister, you have mentioned that some public policies for the management and mitigation of the impacts of natural disasters in your country. What initiatives are being promoted through international cooperation to improve coordination, knowledge sharing, and best practices in environmental issues, disaster risk management and adaptation to climate change among the countries in your region?
¿Se escucha? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Gracias. Sí, la perspectiva internacional y de cooperación es fundamental para el gobierno dominicano en su proceso de aprendizaje y de trabajo conjunto para enfrentar el desafío del cambio climático y de la gestión de riesgos de desastre. El país en este momento, como un ejemplo, yo creo que con esto respondo su pregunta, tiene 2 proyectos binacionales y 2 proyectos regionales, o participa en 2 proyectos binacionales y 2 proyectos regionales que permiten fortalecer las capacidades de gestión de riesgos de desastre. Y de gestión del desafío del cambio climático. 2 de los proyectos son binacionales, y binacional quiere decir entre la República Dominicana y Haití. Para quienes no conocen, la República Dominicana comparte la isla con Haití. Y obviamente el desafío es conjunto. Entonces se tiene un proyecto que tiene como objetivo aumentar la capacidad de adaptación ecosistémica de los productores agroforestales, autoridades locales y comunidades en las reservas de la biosfera que están ubicadas en la zona de frontera. Es un primer proyecto que trabajamos con los colegas de Haití. Y el segundo proyecto tiene el propósito de fortalecer la protección de la población fronteriza que vive en las cuencas frente a los peligros naturales, reducir la degradación de los recursos naturales en esa zona, fortalecer la colaboración y la coordinación binacional a nivel local en temas ambientales y de gestión de riesgos de desastres y adaptación al cambio climático. Pero no solo trabajamos con Haití, también trabajamos con otros países que forman parte de la región del Caribe por un lado y de Centroamérica por el otro. La República Dominicana tiene un pie en el Caribe y otro pie en Centroamérica. Con los países del CARIFORO, es decir, los países del Caribe, de CARIFORUM, de CARICOM, de la Caribbean Community, junto a la República Dominicana y Haití, participan en un proyecto para combatir los efectos negativos del cambio climático, fortaleciendo la capacidad de pronóstico y de generar información para incorporar en la planificación nacional el enfoque de gestión de riesgo climático y para fortalecer la seguridad hídrica. Y un segundo proyecto es con Centroamérica, con los países del sistema de integración centroamericana, que tiene el propósito de aumentar la adaptabilidad ante los efectos del cambio climático. Este proyecto tiene un fuerte énfasis de cooperación e intercambio de experiencias para mejorar la capacidad de restaurar ecosistemas y paisajes. Le paso la palabra, Su Excelencia.
Muchas gracias, señor viceministro. I think that we have to wrap up. We had a fruitful discussion where the panelists have shared important aspects of their country's policy in addressing the vulnerabilities and in building resilience to the threat of climate change, natural disasters, external shocks, and other vulnerability of SIDS. We have taken note of the cure and recovery policies to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic that have disproportionately hit and affected small island developing states. We have heard the importance of setting a multidimensional vulnerability index in order to address the access to financing and to the other means of implementation, so SIDS can be able to have a special treatment in financing for development policies, take into account their special situation and specific needs. Finally, I would like to thank the speakers for their insights and also for their comprehensive presentation that they shared with us today. And now I will hand over to Mr. Gary Conneal. Mr. Gary, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Secretary Vieira, for moderating these discussions. Excellent job indeed. I think this was a very enlightening and certainly interesting discussion that will help feed into the ongoing discussions that are happening around specific issues of concern to small island development states. I would like to thank really all the participants for their useful insights. I know that this commitment of time is usually quite a challenge, and we're very grateful that everybody was able to join. And before we finished, we had also scheduled to have a final speaker, which is Undersecretary General Courtney Rattray, the new High Representative for Least Developed Landlocked Countries and Small Island Development States. Unfortunately, due to our unforeseen circumstances, he was unable to join us today, but he made sure that his office would be represented by the very able Miss Tishka Hope Francis, who's here with us, who is the head of Small Island States Unit. So before I would like to hand it over, she is a Bahamian citizen, has firsthand experience with the kinds of vulnerabilities that affect SIDS. Ms. Francis, I hand over to you for the final words.
Thank you, Mr. Facilitator. And as you said, I have the honor to deliver the following remarks on behalf of Mr. Courtney Rattray, USG and High Representative for the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS, who regrettably could not join us today. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, dear colleagues, distinguished participants. It has been a great pleasure being with you today. And I indeed welcome the opportunity to reflect on this very compelling discussion highlighting the common vulnerabilities of SIDS in the context of COVID-19 recovery and this year's VNRs. Today's event has demonstrated an exemplary model of SIDS coming together to share their responses to the many challenges posed by multiple global crises and the innovative solutions they have championed notwithstanding. The VNR is a very important tool in this regard. The collaborative efforts among SIDS serve as an inspiration to all, and I wish to congratulate those 6 SIDS presenting their VNRs this year. Your respective contributions to this exercise are commendable. I also wish to acknowledge the important role of the RCs and MCOs in supporting SIDS in the implementation of the SDGs and the Samoa pathway on the ground. Distinguished participants, the vulnerabilities of SIDS are well known. We also know that these vulnerabilities have been exacerbated as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting economic public health crises, which has disproportionately hit the SIDS. The road to recovery, coupled with the already vulnerable state of SIDS, now has more obstacles than ever. The health sector in these countries are under enormous pressure with a high incidence of communicable diseases. Economies have been devastated, with a particularly heavy blow dealt to the tourism sector, the lifeblood for so many SIDS. We have also seen increased food insecurity in societies already dealing with increased vulnerability to extreme weather events, high debt levels, and limited access to concessional financing. In light of the exogenous shocks that have overwhelmed our countries, many of which have been thrown in sharp relief today, this event could not be more timely. The joint reflection of SIDS to identify and encapsulate their shared challenges and best practices is imperative to recovery from COVID-19 while achieving the SDGs and the Samoa pathway. Although for many, this current situation may be dire, it offers opportunities to prioritize and accelerate their sustainable development, as well as to catalyze more global support for SIDS. It has been heartening to hear of the work being done to promote best practices in environmental issues, disaster risk management, and adaptation to climate change. Indeed, many of our SIDS have driven the advancement of their blue and green economies and develop recovery and resilience plans, some of which have been integrated into national strategic plans for achieving sustainable growth and SDGs. We have also heard of efforts to integrate the implementation of the Samoa pathway in these plans and strategies, including through investment in public-private partnerships. These are important milestones for SIDS. As we move forward, we must address the challenges in relation to access to financing, which came through loud and clear today. All SIDS are in urgent need of additional liquidity to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. It is therefore critical that the assessment of financing needs take account of the inherent vulnerabilities of these countries. As you would have heard, OHR, LLS, and DESA are currently coordinating a process to explore the development of a possible multidimensional vulnerability index that would capture the particular vulnerabilities of SIDS. This will result in recommendations by the Secretary General in his report on the Samoa pathway, which will be released in August. OHR-LLS will also release a dedicated report which will build on the technical workshop series on the MVI and further elaborate on the issues of measuring vulnerability. This work has the real potential to guide the global response to ensure inclusive development for the most vulnerable. OHR-LLS is working hard to build a broad coalition in support of this initiative with a view to securing the widest possible adoption by all relevant stakeholders. Distinguished participants, it is clear that collaboration and cooperation among SIDS is key to ensuring a full and swift recovery in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is why the SIDS National Focal Point Network, supported by my office, is such a crucial mechanism for these countries. The network, launched in 2018, fosters the type of peer learning and exchange of best practices that we have heard here today, and strengthens coherence and coordination of SIDS issues at the national, regional, and global levels. We hope to have an in-person meeting of the SIDS NFPs as soon as possible, and in the meantime, we will continue to convene virtual meetings to keep the focal points engaged on these very important issues. We very much look forward to carrying forward these discussions in that context. Distinguished participants, as I conclude, I thank AOSIS, the governments of Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Cabo Verde, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and the Marshall Islands, as well as UNDESA and our RCOs, for bringing us together today in this meaningful exercise. Indeed, discussions such as these are imperative to resilience building and recovery in SIDS while ensuring the core principle of leaving no one behind. I thank you, Mr. Facilitator.
Ms. Francis, thank you very much for those remarks. Please also extend our gratitude to Undersecretary Rattray. I know he would have really wanted to join us today, but I think you've done an excellent job in sharing his vision of where he wants to take the office and how he sees us collaborating in the future. With that, honorable ministers, excellencies, dear colleagues, we have come to the end of today's session. I would like to thank again all our speakers, of course, the moderator, and naturally all the attendants from around the world. I hope you found this as interesting as I did, and we look forward to working with you all to ensure that the important points that were raised today are actually addressed. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, and of course the rest of your week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the moderation and facilitation, and to all the speakers.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.